Good afternoon, everyone. I'm June Rawl, the director for IPDAY, and I'm really happy that all of you are able to join us today for IPDAY's Webinar Wednesday, Digital Literacy and Distance Learning. Well, we all know way too well the significance of incorporating digital literacy within our adult education classroom. So I'm really happy to present to you today Ariel Pachokas and Valerie Guillaume from Collier County. They are going to share some strategies how they have supported and engaged students in a virtual environment at their site. But before we get started, I will remind you of a few housekeeping reminders. You know that you all are in listen-only mode and that that the presentation is being recorded. It all is archived on the IPDAY website. There's a PowerPoint that goes along with this webinar today, and you'll see the link in the chat right now if you want to pull it up, or you can also go and grab it from the IPDAY website. It will be there for later too, if you want to share it with any of your colleagues. If you have a question, please type it into the Q&A option, and Ariel and Valerie and myself will be monitoring that throughout the webinar and answering those questions or comments or concerns that you have. So with that, Ariel and Valerie, I'm going to turn it over to you and let's get started with this webinar.
Thank you, June. Thank you, everybody. Excited to be here. Both Valerie and I have been doing a little bit with distance learning, like everybody else out in the state. And so we're just going to be sharing a little bit of what we've encountered, some of the best practices we've come across, and also sharing a little bit about IPDAY has put together in one of their toolboxes for distance learning, and hopefully answering some questions and maybe showcasing some new pieces. So our goals for today are really to talk about the need for digital literacy. That's the first piece, setting the stage for its importance. Then moving from there to incorporating digital literacy. How can we do it? The how within every classroom, whether we're in a traditional site, whether we're in correctional sites. How do we start incorporating digital literacy and the importance of doing that? From there, moving on to what are the components of a strong virtual learning program, and in kind of exploring those key pieces that we need to consider as we roll things out, and then ultimately strategies to support students transitioning to virtual learning, strategies to support students engaging in student learning, and even strategies to support teachers in delivering meaningful and purposeful lessons. So we've got the need for digital literacy, and it comes in all forms, from employment to community services to entertainment, education, safety. I mean, this is a real ugly slide right now, but we did it intentionally because that's the world that if we're interested in finding employment, finding work, entertainment, coming to adult education in Collier County, we need to be able to navigate. Our students need to be able to navigate. I love the one from McDonald's. That's my favorite one of all. Right there in the middle in the red, you've got crew members day shift from McDonald's. Apply now. But if you look carefully, chat to apply. So they're not even asking you to fill out a form. They're asking you to chat with somebody to starting the process. Think of the barriers that that's presenting for our students, those students that need those opportunities most, and how do we get them ready to move forward in this world?
So some common questions. Well, our students don't have the technology they can connect. Or perhaps now that the pandemic is over, maybe we'll go back. Well, we can't go back to what we've always done because the technology is everywhere, as we just saw in that slide. Our students need those skills to navigate the community and navigate and find services they need.
And so a big piece to this is how do we do it? Well, it's going to vary from program to program and class to class, but it starts with us, as administrators, promoting, encouraging, giving the tools, starts with us as teachers, being able to gain the confidence, stretch ourselves, be flexible and open-minded to that painful part of change with the technology. But it also starts with recognizing that technology instruction doesn't have to happen with the internet and connecting with laptops and computers. We know that all of our students, when I walk into an adult ed classroom here in Collier, the majority of our students have some kind of smart device sitting on the desktop. How are we engaging them to use those smart devices to connect to the school Wi-Fi, to download an app from either Burlington English or from Pearson or from Cengage to continue working on their language skills and giving them those tools? Our publishers are creating this. They're charging us, rightfully so. We need to now take those tools and utilize them with our students and encourage our students and give them the tools to be successful in order to navigate.
So digital literacy doesn't only mean for those students doing distance learning or virtual instruction. Digital literacy is within all classrooms. Whatever device students have, whether it be a desktop, a laptop, an iPad, we need to teach them how to operate it and how to successfully use it.
And so, and that's a perfect comment, because we have a corrections program also, very small program. And some of us might have internet. The majority of our correction program does not have anything connected to the internet, but they do have laptops available. So we are able to incorporate some basic skills of how to navigate, how to power it up, how to shut it down, but more importantly, how to use the tools within that laptop that are already downloaded to stretch and build their confidence in navigating technology. So we're talking about the how. We're moving on to the building a distance learning program. So we've established the reason for the why of why are we doing this. We've established a little bit of the how of where do we start, and it starts with all of us. And now we're building a distance learning program. And this is where we're going to spend most of our time. So we've identified a few key components in building a distance learning program. For us, it's the design and implementation of a virtual instruction model. What does that consist of? It's the learning management system. What is the tool that you're going to be predominantly using? Is it Canvas, Blackboard, Edmodo, Moodle, Google, Office 365? There's so many options, but we have to have one that's consistent throughout for a successful program, because we want to be able to coach the teachers. We want to be able to coach the students. We want to be able to coach them as they transition, that they're transitioning on the same platform. We don't want to be having to be retooling everyone on a new platform every time we pivot to another, whether we go from ESOL to GED or ESOL to ABE, or from a beginning level to an advanced level. We want to make sure that the curriculum we talk about, that the curriculum we're using allows for the students to be able to use it in a traditional classroom environment, but also in a online environment. And what will that look like? What will that curriculum look like? Is it aligned to our standards in WIOA? Finally, we also want to make sure that we have a system for tracking and monitoring students, tracking and monitoring student progress, student engagement, student participation. One thing that we've been doing that's a little bit different is that we also utilize a virtual platform for engaging, Zoom. We've been using Zoom. We've used WebEx as well. And I know there's a couple of other options with Google Connect or Google Classroom. So there's got to be some form of way to connect with students so that we can see them, they can see us at times. If anything, it's just to provide that technical support where we can see what they're looking at when they're having technical problems. And we'll dive into that more as we get further into this. As we pivot, obviously there's a need for marketing of the virtual program. That was a big one for us, because as we were coming out of the pandemic back into open classes, everybody wanted to come back to our traditional settings. We know we will never close down our programs because we need our traditional settings, because the majority of our students do not have that access. But for those students that do have the technology and that access, we need to help them understand that there's another way to learn that is really centered around their needs, their time constraints, and their availability. And that's where virtual learning comes in. And so it's establishing that big vision, establishing that vision for the students and for the entire program. So then we get into supporting teachers.
So one way to think about when building a strong program needs to be priority supporting teachers. And what does that mean? Well, teachers, they need help, they need support to navigate the instructional tools and platforms. Like Ariel mentioned, once there is a vision, once there is a common platform that's going to be used, teachers need support so they can be proficient in using that. Supporting teachers to deliver instruction and to engage students in a virtual world, in our physical classroom as well. Teachers need all the tools necessary so they can keep students engaged, so we can get high level of participation and engagement.
And with that, we need to also take a step back. We know that when we first launched into these virtual instruction or online learning program, we noticed that we had strong teachers in the traditional classroom. But the minute we brought them out of that traditional classroom, their tools that they were reliant on were no longer there or didn't work anymore. So we have to come at this in a distance learning world. How do we engage students in that third dimension, for a lack of a better word, as we're working through a screen? How do we allow students to have a conversation with partners or chat? How do we engage them with a math problem when they're struggling or working at a very low level? So we have to think of this world very differently than we have before. Not that it's harder, it's just different. And some of the tools and strategies transfer very easily. Others we need to kind of retool or tweak in a form. The last piece here is supporting students. Our students are capable of connecting. They are able of navigating. In fact, like I said before, I would say the vast majority of all of our students in adult education in Collier are connected one way or another. If anything, I've seen it where we bring in a guest teacher and they are on WhatsApp, letting all the students know, hey, we have a different teacher today. And our enrollment numbers fluctuate drastically. Why? Because it's not their regular teacher. I know that they're connected. So we have to use the skills that they have, tool them up to the level that they can connect and allow them to be successful in the virtual world. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what does that look like and how do we help them with that. Whew, that was a mouthful.
So over the course of this presentation, we're going to highlight really just strengths of a virtual program. And to start, we're going to start with three key components to a distance learning program. So the 3 C's: comprehensive, consistent, and collaborative.
So when we talk about comprehensive, we need a program, and we're talking about, and this is really from an administrative level, we need to have a big vision, a picture of how is this program going to work. It needs to be, in my opinion, needs to be in the same direction as the traditional classroom environment. Has to be aligned to our standards, has to be focused on WIOA. Of course, if it's not relevant to the adult learner, why are we doing it? Because they're going to walk out and they'll let us know, or they won't connect. It has to incorporate digital literacy. Well, why does it need to incorporate digital literacy if we're already in a distance learning program? They should already be understanding technology and being able to navigate it. Well, if we're really going to be comprehensive about it, we need to start incorporating the digital literacy within our traditional classes to build up the students and build the skills that they need, so that as they transition and as they find employment and their lives change, they don't have to stop out of the program. They can continue by transitioning to a virtual learning world. And that's what we're focusing on, and that's how we're delivering it. Obviously, we need to focus on the workforce skills. It has to be accessible through different devices. We've learned this the hard way. We thought everybody was connected. What we learned was everybody is connected. They're just using different devices. So we have to be able. Our vendors, I mentioned it earlier, our publishers, they are building tremendous tools and resources online that are downloadable on multiple platforms and devices. We just need to be able to coach our students to coach our teachers to access that. And then the last bullet, I've already kind of briefly touched upon. We want to make sure that it's all transferable, that a student in a traditional classroom environment can easily pivot into a virtual online learning environment, not because of illness, not because of the pandemic, but because it's our way of ensuring that student retention, that as a student's life changes, they're able to move to another platform and still stay connected, or monitor what the classroom teacher is doing when they're absent for 3 days, but come back on day 4 and continue right where they left off. So then we talk about consistency. And when we're talking about consistent, we want something that promotes the progression from one level to the next. The worst thing we can do is have a student working in one curriculum at one level, and then when they get to the next level, have to recoach and retool them. Also think about how complicated that would be for your teachers. So we want a program, we want a system that's very consistent, whether they're in a traditional classroom, whether they're online, whether they're at the beginning level and they move up a level, that they're using, that allows and facilitates that learning as simple as possible, that it facilitates that teaching for the teacher, or for us right now, when we're struggling to find guest teachers to cover when we have 2 or 3 teachers out in one building, that we can bring in a teacher from the evening into the day, and they can help coach or help lead that class because they're familiar with the curriculum and can be easily facilitated from one world to the next. And ultimately has the ease of use for both the student and the teacher, the end user.
Ariel, I also want to highlight here for the consistent. In the early stages, student would always ask, what is better? Should I go online or should I go in person? Should I go to this side or should I go virtual? So the idea is to keep our program a well-rounded program, comprehensive and consistent. It doesn't matter that a student comes in person or chooses to do a distance program from home and connect to a synchronous model or flexible model, they receive the same instruction. The curriculum is the same, the platforms are the same. So if they want to change from one learning environment to the next, they're not at a disadvantage because the program is overall, it follows the same curriculum and the same tools are being used in both areas.
And we're really new at this distance learning, so we don't have the data to show, but so far the performance of an online student in our new program is at the same level as our students that are working through a traditional setting. Why is that? Because they're making the choice of what's going to work best for them. So when they ask that question, what's better? In person's better, right? Because we're there with the teacher. My response is no. What's better is what's going to work best for you. What's going to give us the most persistence in you participating on a regular basis. So we're learning that very important for our adult learners who come in all different needs and backgrounds and goals is to give them options. When we work with adults, adults need options because their lives are much more complicated. And so that brings us to the last C being collaborative. We know that our students and our teachers need that place to interact, engage, bounce ideas, practice, laugh, and sometimes even cry together. We build those relationships. So we need a collaborative place. We need a place to be able to come for that. And that's that platform. So that platform for not only dialogue, but also for submitting work and submitting assignments. So we need to consider all those components. One of the things we found from doing this early, when we first launched this, was the power that our teachers had in supporting each other. When we created, we have, like I mentioned before, we have a team of teachers that teaches at every level in our online program. And they are working collaboratively together, planning together, presenting the same content, only they present it at different times. The great thing about technology, what it allowed us, is that if a teacher is available at a particular time when the other instructor is teaching, hey, I'll come and Zoom right in and observe and listen in and maybe even co-teach with you for that hour. letting the students know that we're working as a team, as a unison, but also giving that one teacher an opportunity to see the practices of another and stealing it for their own practices later. So one of the biggest challenges that came from virtual learning was, we've always said that teachers kind of isolate themselves into their classroom. Well, virtual learning made it worse. We isolated ourselves completely during the pandemic. This allowed us to kind of get out of that shell and learn from each other and best practices. And then the last piece, we need to also establish a mechanism for feedback. Feedback that the teachers can provide to the admin of what's working and what's not, and what additional supports and resources are needed. Feedback from students of what's working for them, what's not working for them, what assistance is needed, and where do we continuously refine our instructional practice.
So before we move on to more of the administrative responsibilities, let's share a little bit more of the resources available. Many of you out there may be building your distance programs, or perhaps you're trying to refine. So on the IPDAY website, we're going to share a couple of resources that are already available for your use.
Okay, so here you should, and I went a little fast, but here you should be able to see, and I'm going to go back up one more screen. So we're here at the IPDAY website, and from the IPDAY website, IPDAY's got an adult education toolbox specific for distance learning assistance. And here we see right off the bat, tips and steps to go virtual. These 4 tips and steps are a tool that we've been reflecting quite a bit on. It comes in a this is a downloadable PDF as well, so that conversations can be had, but it really talks about building strong teacher-student relationships being number 1. Now, all of these pieces, all of these components really allow themselves for the traditional classroom or for the online classroom, but they're really highlighted in an online classroom, because think of your traditional classes and how much we struggle with, or maybe it's just Collier County, of how much we struggle with retaining students. And that's when we have them physically there. Now imagine when we pivot to a virtual world where we don't even have the students sitting in front of us, how much more difficult it is to retain a student without building that teacher-student relationship. So that becomes a key piece that we've been working a lot with, specifically with Bloomboard.
So talking about the promoting norms as well, establishing relationships. When we don't see the students, we need to have a way to connect, and creating those, establishing that environment where students feel safe to share, but also when we teach them, when we give them those skills that they can be successful, knowing how, for example, the students using Zoom, how to, mute themselves, use the chat, how to interact with their teachers. So all of those tips together help build strong teacher-student relationships, and also retention. So students participate, students feel that their teacher appreciate them, engage with them. So even in the virtual platform, students are able to connect and maintain their presence and participation.
So part of this is a combination. We need the teachers component, but then we have some administrative components. And that in number 2, understanding the essential blended learning models, that really needs to come from my experience, or our experience here, needs to come from the administration of, as we go to an online platform or distance learning, what's the learning model going to be? Is it going to be a face-to-face with station rotations, online only, blended with face-to-face and online? What is that model going to look like? And these are just a list or a sampling. There's many others. Then from the teacher's side of the house, number 3, there's got to be a component of a balanced component focusing on individual, where the student individually is focusing on certain content and navigating through it. There's got to be that paired piece where it's either coaching, feedback, working with a partner, and then the group where they're discussing, creating, synthesizing that higher order application, but also that social component that our students are so hungry for. As I scroll further down, IPDAYS also has this amazing downloadable roadmap, transitioning to learning online roadmap. And I believe it's right here. And so this is it. I'm not going to go into the weeds on this one. This is for you to review and explore, but it really gets into what are the different online learning models that exist? What are the key definitions so that we can have a clear understanding? Developing a program online, a teacher presence online, and what does that look like, and what are those strategies? How do we transform from face-to-face to an online learning, and how do we support in that transition? So this roadmap really dives deep into that.
And just to highlight, it's really important, and some of you here may be at different stages of building and refining your virtual programs, but it's really important to identify what model you're going to follow and create that common vision. I think for us in our program, it was in our early stages, it was clear to us that we needed a platform where interaction was going to be the main drive for the program. We wanted to create a platform where students could see their teachers, see their classmates interact. So Zoom in this case helps for that synchronous model. But it was also important for us to create a flexible model for students who work, who are busy, who have a lot of things in their lives where they could just connect in their own times and more asynchronous, watch the recordings, or just work independently on different platforms. So really important to identify what works for you and for your program.
And along those lines, we also were very cognizant of the fact that we work with a predominantly ESOL population, many of them lower level, and what would that look like? And would they be willing to just connect and navigate an instructional platform online on their own, a pat on the back and good luck? Or if we flipped it over to our ABE program, where our largest population of students are working at an NRS level 4, level 3 in many cases in reading. And what does that look like? A 4th grade reading level. And am I really ready to navigate instruction on my own completely? Or am I better suited getting direction from an instructor and having a place to come and get that guidance and support? So we really wanted to identify what is the best way for us to work with our students by providing them the most support. We'll come back to a little bit more details as we continue to talk about that. The other piece I wanted to highlight here on the IPDAY website is administrative best practices for monitoring virtual courses. They have a monitoring tool for virtual classrooms, a PDF. They have a feedback tool for providing feedback to those classes. But the one I really like, because it's a snapshot, all encompassing, is the virtual course checklist. And I think it should be this one, yes. So when we take a look at the virtual course checklist, I love it because it's a great tool to be able to give to a teacher, to be able to look as a program and see where we're going with this, because section 1, number 1, talking about the structure. Does the teacher have their contact information available and uploaded? So if a student has a question, that they can ask that question to the teacher. Is there a syllabus? Is there an instructional framework posted? What does it look like as we navigate, as we start working with students? The delivery of instruction. Number 2, does our content and our class allow for instruction to be delivered successfully to the end user? And how is that being received by the end user? And what feedback is the student going to be receiving from that instructor? Because the worst thing we can do is ask students to provide or do work or do some tasks, and then it goes into a void where they don't know if I did it right. Is anybody looking? That's the quickest way for students to stop participating in class. So very simplistic process. When we look at the process, are we looking at multiple student-teacher interaction types? Are we engaging students with student-student activities? What is that instructional and technical support that's available for students, and the students know how to access it. What instructional and technical support is available for teachers, and do the teachers know and have a safe environment to ask for assistance? And then the last piece are the outcomes. What is it that students how is this going to work for the end user, the student? As I mentioned in my last presentation, do we have an individual instructional student plan that allows for students to see where they're coming in and where they're going? Does the student work reflect understanding of what the intent is really? And again, it all stems right back to feedback. How are we providing purposeful feedback for students to be able to take that and retweak and perfect their work, their math, their reading, their language skills? Anything else?
While we're transitioning back to the PowerPoint slides, I do want to just talk briefly about that feedback piece, because actually it's aligned to a question that came in, where in a virtual world, how do you give personal attention to your students when you're in a virtual platform and you have 20 plus students? Well, there are multiple ways. You know, breakout rooms where you can have small groups based on what we saw on the If Day, creating opportunities for students to communicate in groups, discussions, but providing feedback is really key as well. Students want to know how they're doing. So keeping track of their pronunciation, for example, keeping track of their work, making comments either through the chat box or verbally to students. So finding ways to provide feedback, that way students know that their work, the teacher knows that they're present and keeps track of their work.
And in the last presentation I did, I talked a lot about student feedback, and we're using Canvas, and we're really encouraging, and we use it in the traditional classroom environment, and we're using it online. And the reason we're using Canvas is that it allows the teacher to post work and assignments to students to respond. But again, like I said before, we're working with adults, so we can't just give them tons of assignments or tons of work. We've got to give them very specific. What is it that we are actually asking them to do and to produce for us? Because they're giving up of their time somewhere to do this. And when they do it, we have to provide that follow-up feedback. So Canvas allows us to review what they submitted and provide a quick comment. And the comments can be very simplistic. I don't even have to type. I can record my comment. Think of an ESOL classroom now where the student hears my voice and they get to listen to the feedback I'm giving. Tommy, I love the way you responded here. Would you be able to elaborate a little bit more? Thank you, great job. So very simplistic, very easily. I saw another question come in about having over 20 adult students in their class, and how do I give them a feeling of personal attention? We're going to kind of get to that one in a little bit, but I wanted to shout it out there. So here we have administrative responsibilities. So we've broken the next two slides apart, one with the administrative responsibilities that have to occur because there has to be a direction and a guidance. And then the following one was going to focus more on instructional responsibilities because we all have a role that we play. So there has to be a clear vision and direction of the intention of distance learning. If we're just doing it because it's a phase, it's not going to work. When we've been doing distance learning for a while, however, it hasn't been to the level that we're doing it now. The pandemic, I'll use it again. I think we're all trying to move away from the pandemic, but sometimes we just need to highlight it a little bit. While it did bring a lot of challenges in our world, it gave us an opportunity to reflect and reinvent learning. And so for us, we can't go backwards. We need to keep moving forward. And so as we reinvented it, we looked at it as a way of retaining students, engaging students, but we also saw it as we also need to elevate our instructors. We have to give them the tools to be successful in teaching technology, giving them resources, giving them support to allow them to learn and explore along with the students. We also needed to identify an instructional platform and curriculum. We talked earlier about that, of how critical that is to be consistent across multiple levels, across multiple programs, so that as a student moves from one to another, they're moving seamlessly. We need to communicate the learning models. What do we mean by that? That's our marketing campaign. It starts with our teachers understanding that there are different models, so that as their students tell them, teacher, I can't continue anymore, they can let them know, oh, don't worry. Did you know we have this available also? We also communicate the learning models at our orientation. We communicate it with every student participating, and they're participating in an online orientation, regardless if they have technology or not. So let me say that again. Regardless if our students have technology or not, they're going to be participating in an online orientation. Why do we do that? Well, we're giving them the flexibility to do it from their home if they want to. If they don't have the technology, they're going to come into our campus. But then there, we're going to put them in front of a laptop supported with staff behind the scenes to be able to get them connected, each with their own headphones, each with the mic working. And what are we doing? We're allowing them to experience the world of digital literacy and digital learning on an online platform for the very first time, and seeing that as we're doing our orientations and they can ask us questions and we can ask them questions and they see us and we see them, that they can quickly assess that here's another way that I can learn that I didn't think I could, and I can do it from home or I can do it from the break room. So that's where we're talking about communicating learning models. Building in the support for teachers, PD is an ongoing component. RPD, and again, in adult education, PD never stops, at least not in our world here. Why? We are always hiring and onboarding new instructors, because life happens, just like life happens with our students, life happens with our instructors as well. So we're always coaching and engaging. Part of the piece we've built into our onboarding process is we've always had a component where we allow teachers to observe a classroom environment. What does a beginning level look like? What does an intermediate level look like? What does an advanced level look like? Then we took it to one more level. Let's connect tomorrow online and take a look what an online beginning level looks like, an online intermediate class looks like, and an online advanced level looks like. What are we doing? We're building the capacity among our teachers to also be able to pivot back and forth from one environment to the other, but also setting the stage of this isn't going away, this is a necessity, and we're all in it together. The support for students. Valerie, I'll let you talk a little bit about that and maybe some of the student workers we've established.
Support for students is key, obviously. Admin, you need to plan and implement ways that you're going to support your students throughout. From those beginning level students who are not proficient in the language, first of all, and in the technology. So having your staff ready, and we're fortunate in our program here in Collier that we're able to have student ambassadors, student workers. So they are students, but they're also compensated for times that they can help fellow students connect to the technology and help them in their native language. At this point, it's not about instruction, it's about learning and making sure that students know how to log in, know how to find their assignments in Canvas, know how to log into Zoom and use the tools, etc. But also, who do they go to if they have questions? So having, we call them like the tech line, so that we can troubleshoot and support students throughout. So that's key. We're constantly positioning the staff members that will be this first line of defense if students need help. So that's important. And then also we'll talk about monitoring of student learning and participation. As an admin, we need to receive feedback from how is it going? Is this program working? How are the teachers doing? How are the students doing? So we're going to show just a brief spreadsheet of our ESOL Advanced online and how we keep track and monitor. Oh, actually, you have it already up, so I'll let you share about the.
Okay, so one of the things, so I'll talk a little bit about our model that we have. We have a synchronous model, just to paint the picture so you understand where we're coming from. We have a synchronous model where students can connect with the teacher and they see the teacher and the teacher sees the students. This is an actual class list. We've removed the names and student ID numbers for our student confidentiality. But this is a roster from one of our high intermediate classes, ESOL classes. One of the individual participant asked the question earlier of how do I create that that relationship, that personal connection when I have 20 plus students? Well, this class here, you'll notice, is a long list of about 40 some students, 43 in here. And so it is pretty large, very large, I would say. One of the things I'm known for packing people in classes. We have typically in traditional classes 30. The wonderful thing about online learning is I don't have a fire code. That's a joke. But it is one of the things that we've done that's unique is if we did create something that was online, it was intended to be flexible, not an alternative, but flexible. And so in creating flexibility, I needed a classroom environment that students could connect in the morning, or if my schedule changed, can I connect in the evening? But how do I do that if if I'm trying to connect with my teacher? Well, we have two teachers. It's a team, actually. We have two teachers teaching this class. They plan together, they work together, and they teach. Only one teaches in the morning, the other teaches in the evening. These are not full-time teachers. These are truly part-time instructors, adjunct instructors, for lack of a better term, but working in unison, just at different times. So they share a roster of students. And on here, we kept it very easy. We put all the important information on this roster: their email, their phone number, why we get communication, contact, enrollment date, just so we know when they started, their test date, NRS scores of where they're functioning. So we have a pretty homogeneous class of level 5, 6, mainly level 5, high intermediate. But more importantly, they're also tracking to see their participation in class, and as we're connecting with students, what the comments were. And so we, like I said earlier, we have a team, 2 instructors, support staff, and also coordinators monitoring and supporting all of these students and supporting the teachers, because this virtual learning is not easier. It's very different, and we need to think differently about it.
So let me just add part of the administrative responsibilities. So think about your local site, your traditional classrooms, or any schools. You have an entire staff supporting, maybe a front desk, a receptionist, or whoever you have mending calls, receiving students. Well, in the virtual world, you have to plan to have as much support as possible or as available. So in our case, we have built the program in a way that there is always a team supporting each level. So in this case, you can see a couple of pieces, but always keeping track of the students' participation, comments, and also their hours. How much time are they spending outside of class using the technology? And we keep track on a weekly basis of how much time they put in.
And as you probably said, well, the 40 students looks like a lot, but remember that those 40 students are being shared among 2 teachers. And so those 40 students, you'll notice if we're looking at January 20th for participation, we had the E means they connected in the evening. The M means they connected in the morning. The A, they were absent from class that day. Canvas hours, we're seeing some of the login time. As they start lower, but as they progress and get more confident in Canvas, you see the hours increasing to 17 to 16, and they end up going up to about 30 hours a week in some cases, depending on it. And so this is a live document. And so we see the attendance for yesterday in there, and we're still tweaking the attendance because they're uploading it as they go. The teachers do take attendance and focus, but this is one place that we ask them to duplicate their work, because at a snapshot, we get to see in live time who's connecting, who's working, who is not, who do we need to follow up with and provide some additional support.
So now we can talk a little bit more about the instructors. What are the instructional responsibilities?
And I'm just pivoting over there, so
Okay.
you're a little faster than me, but let's see if I made it there.
Perfect. So instructional responsibilities, always growing, growth mindset, planning, delivering, and constantly reflecting on your instruction, keeping students engaged, supporting students, being really at the forefront, but building relationships. That's really important, not only in a physical, but in a virtual platform, knowing your students and building those, really nurturing those relationships, maintaining engagement. just like we have to attend a lot of meetings and webinars, but we want to make it, it needs to be meaningful and relevant to the adult learners. And then of course, providing feedback. Students want to know how they are doing. So like Ariel mentioned, some of the new ways you can record your voice and record a feedback and send to your students. Maybe type something quickly, doesn't have to be a whole paragraph, but just a few words letting students know that, how they're doing and what they need to improve on.
Great comments. So then we get into student support, and we touched upon this just because we couldn't avoid it early on. We just need to highlight it one more time because it's that important. Just like we provide tremendous support for teachers, and we have to tool teachers and ensure, and I have to be on the front line myself as an administrator, as the instructional leader for our program. I need to be also retooling myself and ensuring that I'm comfortable navigating all the resources and tools, because I have to set a bar, set an expectation, and that we all can learn, but we're all going to learn together. So along those lines, we have to have a strong support for our students, communicating the program expectations across the board, from administration to teachers to support staff to students, because students are our biggest promoter. If I ask any of our students, how do they find our programs? The vast majority, 95% of our students find our programs by word of mouth. So they're our biggest promoter. As we navigate, we need to support our students in navigating the technology and the applications. We mentioned before, our students are connected. They have tools at their fingertips. We just need to help them utilize those tools as the resources that they are to navigate our community, to navigate their instruction, to access more information or learning. The establishing of classroom norms, that's a critical one. And that goes back to how do I give a feeling of personal attention? It comes through those classroom norms. We have established those classroom norms with both our online world and in our classrooms. We encourage teachers, but it doesn't come from administration to say, these are the norms that you need to follow. Classroom norms are developed by the instructor with the students in collaboration. So you need to take a step then and ask yourself, well, what would that look like in a non-English beginning level class? Well, it starts very simplistic with lots of smiles, listing out some ideas of what we're going to be doing, but then how are we going to operate? And we're going to do it very simplistically and very easily. And the goal is for everyone to participate, but we have to start somewhere, and we have to communicate those norms in one way or another. And the technology makes it very easy to translate and communicate those ideas regardless of the language.
I do want to mention one more thing regarding norms and establishing that environment. So think about, for your traditional classroom, when a new student arrives, you would most likely, well, depending on how large your site is, direct them to their classrooms, sometimes maybe escort them to their classrooms and let the teacher know, okay, Ariel, today you have a new student in your class. Well, we try to mirror and model this and do that in our virtual environment as well. When we get new students, so we share with them the expectations, the norms, etc. We meet with them, the student ambassadors assist, or maybe we do a breakout room so that they're not just dropped. We don't just drop them in a virtual class, but we quote unquote escort them virtually. But we also provide that support to them so that they feel that they belong, that they're part of that class and they're able to continue.
So then, as a wrap up, some best practice takeaways. What are those? Well, it's a highlighting of the key pieces. If we could recommend anything, these are the main pieces to really hone in on. Creating a supportive coaching environment for digital literacy. And that's kept general, because we need to coach and support students, and we need to coach and support teachers. And it happens in both sides. Ensure proficiency with technology. We have to get them comfortable, and it only starts by allowing them to use and navigate. And again, keeping it generic, because it's not just students, it's students and teachers. Building relationships and rapport with everybody. We need to feel comfortable at a level that we're allowed to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes. But we also have to come at it with a proactive mindset. Establishing the norms, not only in the classroom, but also in the way that we operate with our staff and our colleagues. because we needed to create, especially now, things are much more, everybody is very concerned and everything is very stressful, and we have piled on a tremendous amount of new expectations on all classrooms. So how do we lessen that? Planning and delivering of instruction. How do we provide that time for teachers to plan meaningful lessons so that they can deliver that purposeful instruction? And finally, maintaining engagement and monitoring that instruction. What tools are we going to utilize to engage and monitor what is happening? And not just administration monitoring, but really supporting teachers to monitor their students' learning. And so you see the little circles here that it's an admin, teacher, student, all working together. We have to. With that said, that brings us to our last slide. If by chance there's a follow-up questions, questions regarding what we shared, or someone wants to come and visit,
no travel necessary. We're happy to welcome you to any of our virtual classes or any of our orientations. So feel free to reach out to Ariel or myself, and we'll be happy to connect with you and send you some links that you can visit us virtually. And with that,
I guess we're passing it over to June.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ariel and Valerie. And, you know, if you really would like some more specific ideas, feel free to reach out to Ariel and Valerie, and of course, all of us at IPDAY. So as you know, we love to hear from you and your feedback. So if you would just take a few seconds, 30 seconds to answer these 3 short questions, we would really appreciate hearing from you. And while you do that, I want to remind you of our next webinar, which is scheduled on March 2nd. We'll be back talking about IETs, and the title will be Engaging Adult Education Through IET-Centered Instruction. So we look forward to seeing you on March 2nd again. Until then, I want to thank Ariel. Thank you, Valerie, again for your facilitation today, and please stay safe and well, and we'll see you next week.